What's up, beautiful people? We're doing another patient journey. This is a segment where I discuss things that patients frequently say to me, whether that's the patients at the big box clinic I work at or my own patients in my direct primary care clinic. And the whole reason I do this is because these are, one, things patients frequently say. So I have these conversations all the time. And two, I think these are ways that you can begin to think about changing habits or behaviors, or why you do habits or behaviors, or maybe things that you need to implement in your life. So here's the thing I hear from patients all the time. I know I have a bad diet. And so it's really puzzling when people say this to me. Number one, well, if you think you have a bad diet, why aren't you doing something about it? We'll get on that later. But most of the time when people hear that they have a bad diet or someone's talking about bad diets online, it's immediately followed by this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, maybe stop being lazy or something else, right? The thing I say right after they said it is, well, why do you think you have a bad diet? And they usually tell me something like, well, I eat too much processed foods, I eat out too much, I eat too much sugar, I drink too much soda, I eat too much candy. Sometimes it's I don't eat fruits and vegetables. So there's a whole different reasons why people may think their diets are bad. And after they tell me this, I usually say, well, why don't we reframe this? Instead of thinking that foods are good or bad, how about we think about foods that we should eat liberally and foods that we should eat sparingly? Because the evidence does show that if people think things are bad or they should avoid feel bad, makes them feel like it's a willpower issue by why they can't adhere to a nutrition plan, when really, in my experience, it's a planning issue. It's not a willpower issue. Of course, there is some willpower involved. We live in a very, I wouldn't say toxic, but the food environment is not conducive to health unless you start to think outside of the normal food environment, right? Everything is super quick, packaged, calorie dense, nutrient poor. You know, you can go and get calories on any corner. We live right across the street from a gas station that's a convenience store. I can go get packaged food over there 24/7. It's open all day. I literally can walk 50 feet and get nutrient poor, calorie dense foods. So I reframe the conversation. Well, how about we think about foods we should eat liberally and foods we should eat sparingly? What are foods that you think we should eat liberally? And they'll usually tell me like fruits and vegetables, maybe nuts and seeds. They'll say meats, maybe dairy, depending on their view. And I say, well, what are foods that you should eat sparingly? And then people will say things like ice cream, pizza, other junk foods. And I say, yeah, that's pretty much what we should do. I like to give people 80-20 rule. 80% of your food should be minimally processed or whole foods. Minimally processed is stuff like frozen strawberries or blueberries, frozen vegetables, you know, things that are already cut so you don't have to spend time cutting them or peeling them or things like that. Those are minimally processed foods. We use a lot of that in our household. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that frozen fruits and frozen vegetables aren't as nutritious as whole fruits and vegetables. The evidence that we have actually supports that they are as nutritious, maybe even a little bit more nutritious, because they're picked ripe and then flash frozen. So they're picked at the prime time for when those fruits and vegetables have gathered nutrients from the soil. So we do a lot of that because it saves time. So another thing I'll say, well, you feel like you're eating out too much, right? So why aren't you cooking at home? And I'll hear things like, I don't have time, I'm not a good cook, I don't know how to cook, things like this. And then we'll talk about time-saving strategies. I'll ask them, well, what do you think would save you some time? And they'll say things like prepackaged or maybe frozen or maybe planning things out. And then I'll give them a little guidance there, just like we just talked about. And the whole cooking thing is interesting. Cooking is a skill. And guess what? You can improve just like any other skill. The more you do it, the better at it you get. I've seen that with Brittany over the years. She didn't cook very much before we met. Now she cooks all the time. And her confidence as a chef is growing because she's gotten experience. And it's never been easier to find a recipe. We find recipes all the time, or at least we used to. We need to get back to that. Where on Saturdays, we'd pick out a recipe that we thought sounded good, and we'd make it in the kitchen and eat together and then like watch a movie or something, right? It was a great time for us to connect and bond in the kitchen. And there's actually some data on family dynamics and cooking and eating together and how that brings people together. So I just continue along these lines, and I'll ask people, what do you think an ideal diet looks like for you? Or what are things that you can do to improve your diet, and so on and so forth. So the conversation is a lot different. I'm really just trying to get to why people are making these associations, why they think their diet is bad, why they think they don't have time to cook. And then once I get an answer, I just try to reframe it. Well, what would you need to start cooking? What do you think you can do to improve the nutrient quality? And then I'll inform them of things like nutrient density and calorie density, and how the foods that we want to eat liberally are nutrient dense, and they may not be so calorie dense, right? So these are whole foods, very nutrient dense, may not necessarily be super calorie dense unless, it's a really fatty food, in which case that can still be part of a balanced diet. And then I'll approach the whole calories thing, right? Energy balance is what determines if we gain weight or lose weight. And I have a whole video on energy balance. I'm not going to go into it, but I'll just go into the basic concepts of why eating out all the time or eating fast food or junk food it makes it really hard to have a energy balance that favors either caloric neutrality or a caloric deficit, because those foods are just very calorie dense. They are engineered to be hyper palatable, to have great mouthfeel, to be dissolved and chewed quickly, to make you overeat, to overconsume, so you buy more, right? So these are the things I talk about with people when they say they have a bad diet. And really, I'm just trying to get them to reframe things into a way that they don't think about good or bad. They think about what is conducive for their goals. What do you think is going to add to your health? How are your behaviors subtracting from your health? And then what are some actionable steps that we can do to improve that? Okay, if you're not getting much fiber, how do you think we can get more fiber in your diet? And I give them tips on some of my favorite fiber foods, edamame, the Mission tortillas. You've seen that in my stories. It's like 7 grams of fiber per tortilla. I have no idea how they do that. It's amazing. Sometimes I'll just snack on those things. Ground flaxseed, cacao powder, adding those to my Greek yogurt. The one serving of those total is like 6 grams of fiber right there. Edamame, I think it's like 7 grams of fiber per serving. Might be more than that. I forget. Anyway, there are tons and tons of ways that you can do these things and just add to without significantly feeling like you have to subtract. And telling people that love pizza or burgers or fries to never eat those things are bad, that's not going to be something they can adhere to. And so I'll discuss the concept of a calorie budget. For example, this is just me. It may not be the right situation for you, but if I'm going out to eat on a Saturday night, and I normally at home, my meals are between 600 to 900 calories, give or take. I know that when I go out to eat, it's probably going to be about double the normal amount of calories I'll have in a meal. So I'll do one of two things. I'll either only eat half of what I order out and bring the other half home, or I'll skip lunch. So let's say I'll eat breakfast. I know I'm going out to dinner. I'll skip lunch, and then I'll eat the meal at dinner completely guilt-free, because I've realized that that's fit into my calorie budget. So these are kind of the things that I discuss when it comes to diet. Now, there may be more specific recommendations, like if someone's diabetic or they're insulin resistant, or if someone has elevated blood lipids. There are even some situations where certain dietary patterns may be beneficial for certain disease states, like if people have seizures. And that requires a lot more nuance, and I'll usually refer those people to dietitians anyway. I usually refer people to dietitians to begin with. There's some great ones here in Houston that I've worked with and collaborated with. So this has been a discussion of a patient journey, something I hear all the time. Well, I know I have a bad diet, or when I ask them what their diet is, my diet is bad, and how I approach that conversation to get them to reframe it into a way that empowers them to take control of their nutrition plan and fuel themselves for their goals. Thank you. God bless.